Cheers. This next Bongversations is on the vaudeville idea and the idea of movies and TVs and inspiration and ideas of reality which can be born from these different stories, albeit falsely. Also, there were a few pops in the audio, and I went ahead and removed those. So it was just a few moments where it was starting to pop, so I got rid of that. So enjoy the rest. Cheers. Be blessed.
Good evening. Welcome to wherever you are, on this episode of Bongversations number 24 with Rick and Dave J, the fabulous Dave J, who is going to open your minds on the subject of vaudeville this week. And it's welcome back after 2 weeks holiday. We've back for episode 24 on the. It's February the 9th today, my end, and probably the 8th in your
Correct.
end. So fantastic.
Yeah,
so Dave, what are you going to say?
A few things going on this week. I was kind of thinking first before we head into the movie theater and talk about kind of the what came before the movie or the talkie and all that good stuff. Make sure we tie it into today and what today's script is putting out, whether it be tomorrow's in the United States anyway, the big so-called football game or the Super Bowl.
Is that tomorrow?
Yeah,
or today?
The Sunday. That's on Sunday.
Okay,
so you're today.
You're my today.
So you have to wait. You have to wait till we catch up.
Okay,
and then
I'll do that.
That's happening on 2/9. So then that's a 9/11 day. And what I also found interesting before we get too far along is that when I first saw that, I said that reminds me of the "It Could Happen Tomorrow" movie poster for Black Sunday. The tagline for the 1977 film was "It could happen tomorrow." And what then I noticed was that the blimp, it's known as the Goodyear blimp. It's going to be in Daytona tomorrow because it's on a 100-year anniversary kind of city tour. And so it's going to be in Florida tomorrow by the Daytona Bike Fest. And now the Bike Fest in that area is just where every street you're going to go onto is going to be full of motorbikes driving up and down just aimlessly all day, every day for the weekend. And just a bunch of bikers and that type of stuff. So I was thinking if you're going to look for kind of a scriptural story going out, the idea of the Black Sunday story is that during an event, and at that time it was the Steelers and the Cowboys, that would be Dallas. Remember Dallas? That goes back to an X-Files episode. Remember Dallas in Fight the Future movie. But then also the idea of Pittsburgh or the Steel, the Man of Steel, the Steel, that idea. So then also you have the idea of a so-called terror attack. So then if there's anything, several years ago there was the Twin Peaks biker hoax. They've used the biker hoax a lot. They used it at Altamont. They used it. You remember the story? Of the Altamont?
We should do in the future talk about that because it's very interesting.
I lived within view of that place for some time when I was in Tracy. So the Altamont Raceway hoax, the
Rolling Stones.
The Twin Peaks hoax, which was one that really happened back. I would say that was almost 10 years ago, probably now. But the Twin Peaks hoax, the idea of the biker gangs getting into that's another story that will be coming out in a little bit. And bikers idea, and what the bikers idea is it's generally they're seen as dark angels, those who patrol the streets and are law within themselves. You have some groups like Hell's Angels, things like that, which are just direct, but then you'll have other groups that are miscreants or malefactors, different words that have evil connotations to it, and then you're usually wearing
Oh,
the black,
yeah, the
and
devil's
the tough,
disciples.
the
Yeah,
tough guy, the tough guy idea, you know.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Sonny
so
Barger,
yeah,
Sonny
so
Barger. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, so you kind of you have these ideas of template characters, meaning that a certain character is presented to you wearing a costume, and that costume presents an idea. So then jumping into the movie theater, we were talking earlier, we were talking about how the audience gets in tune with film or TV show. If you're watching it in person with a group of people, it's a communal event, and if there's a funny scene and it's actually funny, that the audience will laugh together, be in tune with each other. And then also,
yes.
yeah, and you
Well,
were
yeah,
talking earlier about the tuning fork.
it is. Yeah, yeah. So it's an incredibly powerful thing. You know, it sets off your guitar strings,
Mm-hmm.
you yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why these theatres and the performances are putting people in a tone and a tune, and
Right.
it's mass hypnotic effect.
Yeah.
A good way, yeah, could be used for good, but unfortunately, we've had the negative put on us for many years. And
Yes.
Altamont be a classic example of it, and more to the stuff that we're going to talk about vaudeville as
Yeah,
well.
and
So
in fact, as you go then into the theater, before you go back into time, as you go into the theater, you have that filter too at the box office, meaning that you have 7 or 8, 9 movies to choose from, and then
yeah,
thus the audience you're sitting with has filtered themselves into taste. You know, that audience prefers
yeah,
that, or there might be 1 or 2 people in the audience that are trying something new. But for the most part, you're going to be with those who are in tune with you already, especially if you go to something, let's say a Star Wars or something that has a fan following, right?
yeah. Marvel,
Yeah,
up
right.
Star Wars, blah blah blah. Yeah,
Yeah, so you go in with that idea. Now vaudeville, if you go back to the idea of vaudeville is the idea of public entertainment, whether it be a comedian, just skits or acts. You know, you have 10 to 15 different skits or acts. You might have comedy, you might have juggling, acrobats, magic shows,
yeah,
spoken word. It's really just a variety show. And a lot of the characters you would know from vaudeville by name. Still today, people will probably know some of these names. The idea of Jack Benny, Red
yep,
Skelton,
yep,
Burns and Allen, which is the George Burns character,
yep, yep.
known as GB 72. Yeah, the 72. The idea of George Burns, he played Oh God and also
And
Devil.
he died at 99.
So
So
they
that's
say,
another.
yeah. So the
Yeah, so
idea,
that's that.
yeah. So the idea is, so 99, or the idea of idol, the idea of uh, God and the devil. So then these characters play these different roles, but what they do is they set up a false, false wall, false choice, meaning
Yeah,
that what they're offering is, this is truth and this is fiction, but neither of them are true, because the truth lies outside of the world that is being presented by the vaudeville. Now, the reason I say that like that and I break that word up is because, one, you have vaudeville. Va is the idea, the 6th letter, the idea of va,
wow.
the idea,
Yeah,
yeah, and that brings, of course, the idea of petering out, meaning that you have the to walk on the water. Idea, you don't have to for these different stories, but then if you peter out and then fall for it again, you fall back into the waves called time. The idea of
yeah,
Saturn, the 6, the idea of 6th planet, that idea of the Saturn or timekeeper.
yeah,
Now, before I get too far down with the, I want to finish with the VOD, but odd, AUDE, which is also very interesting, is because you drop the V, and the V is the idea of the 22. So if you walk through that door, right, that 4, that dotlet, walk through it, you're left with the odd, AUDE. Now, odd, as you say it, odd sounds like ED, right? So then you
yeah,
have an oddville, odd town, odd city or idea. Dark City that's presented. You worked on Dark City, didn't you?
Mm.
Yeah.
I certainly did, yes. Very
Yep.
interesting place to work too. Let me just tell you that one.
Yeah, so Dark City as an idea is a presentation given to the audience of a entire of a civilization, of that is their existence, meaning that if you are born into the Dark City so-called universe, that is your existence. You didn't deal with rules of that place.
Yeah.
Right. So then that's the idea of the oddville. And you also notice within vaudeville you see some anagrams. You see live and lied. Those are easy 4 letters. If you want to move it up to let's see, 7, you have devalue. Or you have 6 letters, you have veiled, or the idea of a covered idea. So it's the idea of this vaudeville, this presentation given to you, but it's just a cover for something else.
Yeah.
Meaning that it's like a Trojan horse idea. You also see I find this the 3-3 idea, 3-3 do or die. So you have do or die within. The do is spelled DUE. The idea of a due or payment that is due, meaning that, or it's a payment that is requested for services so called, meaning it's a participation. Let's say if you club member or something like that, you owe dues, weekly what dues are.
Yeah.
That's money. And then so it's do or die, and die in the DIE meaning of ceasing to exist. So you are you to be or not to be? The idea of be, because as you know, if you look at and God said, "Let there be light," and
Right.
also within the so-called Islam, the idea to be is to create. So then be is the creation of. So let there be light. That means light was created by the Word, and the Word of God is Jesus Christ. He's the Word. Read John. So then, therefore, you also have odd, like AUDE, which also means old elder, but old elder. And I find that interesting, Rick, because old elder is also the idea of old, which also leads you back to, guess what? We already talked about the Va, the 6, the Saturn, the Satan character. So then you see then that the vaudeville characters and all these different characters that you kind of run into with vaudeville, you have the Marx Brothers, W.C. Fields. Hey, wow, they have W.C. Fields and Groucho Marx are very similar as far as they're a very similar character, and they're also very similar to modern day kind of character on TV, which was Benny Hill. Benny Hill was a more modern day sketch comedy, and he looks very similar to W.C. Fields. Doppelganger.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah.
And he came from that. He came again from the English version of vaudeville.
Right.
It was the musical theatre, which was huge in England. Huge. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you also have some, like on the music side, you have Al Jolson, who's a singer.
Yeah.
You have Mickey Rooney, who was terrible throughout his career. He started as a child actor. Oh, speaking of which, remember we talked about the Wizard of Oz, and the Cowardly Lion in the Wizard of Oz was started as part of a comic show. Bert Lair, sorry.
Yeah, Bert Lair. Yeah.
So he started out as well. So a lot of these names you know of, and one of those names deals with. I should cover the actual. This is another idea. Remember, I told you in vaudeville, within the word you have veiled as an anagram. Now, if you recall, there was the idea of pre-code, code Hollywood, and postcode. So pre-code, postcode, because now you have more of the MPAA rating system versus the code system. Now, the code system was called the Hayes Code. Now, what I find interesting about the word Hayes is it's the idea of a natural. It's a haze. So then it's
H-A-Z-E, H-A-Z-E.
no, Hay. Yeah, it's
Yeah. Well, both.
Hays.
It's,
Yeah,
as you say,
yeah,
if it sounds like it, it is it.
it is it. Yeah, so H A
Quote Dave
Z
J.
E
Quote
as
Dave J.
well. Yeah, the Hays.
Register quote Dave J. If it
Yeah,
sounds like it, it is it.
yeah, it is. Yeah, that's exactly true. So then you have this Hays code, which just puts like this veneer of respectability on the so. It says you can't show this or you can't do that. Blah blah. What it does is it creates it's also a made up script as well, because within that script it said that as one of the first backgrounds or the first adoptions was 37 states, 37 or 37777 adopt at first. So you see where the story enters the narrative. That's where the seven, and it's always going to be there. And then everything else is just detailed. Is
Yeah,
it
that's
flipping?
better. No, it's better.
Oh, okay, great. Let's see if
Excellent.
that works. Yeah, just let me know because I'll definitely will do the same thing.
I don't want to say nothing because you're dropping too much good stuff, and we don't want to do it if waste the time. But it's fine now. It sounds fine.
Okay, great. So I was looking at the idea of the character of Batman and where its root is in vaudeville as well, with the
Excellent.
with the character of the the character of Batman is the cross between what so called to the biographer is Robert the Bruce character, which was a character, obviously the Braveheart character, which was played by Mel Gibson in the movie theater. The Braveheart character, or Robert the Bruce, crossed with a guy named Mad Anthony Wayne.
Right, gotcha.
Which is
Bruce
a
Wayne.
revolution. Yeah. So then you have the idea of the Bruce Wayne character, and then you have the idea of the Bat. Now in the early film, the Bat Whispers in 1930, which is really it's a follow up to the Bat, which was 1926. Now that was filmed by or produced by Roland West. Now West is you'll notice is the idea that's put in there, but the Bat Whispers was the talking version of the same story. It was like remade twice. One was a silent, the second was a talkie. Now if you watch that, other the occult stuff is right in the open. You barely get into it before one like Napoleon Wilson would love it because there's lots of models used and track cars. It's quite I like the way they did it. So, but then moving to the story, once you get to the story, you get to this almost Blavatsky type woman character, and her housekeeper, where she's playing. Say she doesn't pass transvestigation. That's been going on a long time. As soon as you see that thing, you're like, come on now. So, but what she does is, guess what? The first thing they pull out is when they're trying to figure out what's going on with this whole, I won't ruin the story, but the bat and everything else is that they pull out the Ouija board.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once they pull out the Ouija board, the Ouija board tells them it's a Russian bat. Now, so it's the Russians again. You notice how the Russian story,
got to blame the Russians.
It's always out there. But then you also have this idea of the Russians who have a so-called special forces acting troupe that uses the bat, like the bat signal, as their patch on their uniform.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, yeah. So then the Batman itself goes to the idea of, well, eventually gets all the way back to Yahweh, or the idea of the desert god, or the Satan. But before that, and where it gets mixed into lore, is through the so-called Mayan hoax, the Mayan so-called civilization, where it's just there's barely anything written because it's there wasn't a lot of time spent on that particular story. But within the within that lore, there's a character called Kamazoots. Now Kamazoots is a Batman. Now Kamazoots is a Batman that brings death.
Well,
the idea of death. And Kamazoots is also the idea of what looks just like the same character as Pazuzu from The Exorcist.
The Exorcist, yeah.
It's really the same character. Now Pazuzu is no more is nothing different than the god of the air, or Satan. So which AKA Yahweh, AKA God of the Old Testament, God of the Old Testament. People don't realize that the guy who's telling everybody to kill everybody, that's Yahweh, that's Satan. That's the idea of the bat. That's the idea of also the raven or the crow. And that's also the idea of what's called Shani in Hindu, the Hindu idea. And also some it's also the Krishna character, the Krishna, which was, you would have known they brought it in the 60s and 70s as the Hare Krishna people.
That's right.
And they were trying to confuse people that it had something to do with Christ, when it quite literally has everything to do with Saturn or Shana.
Right.
That is the Krishna character. That's just another name for it. So they were putting Saturn worship directly in front of everybody, trying to costume it as something else, obviously.
Yeah.
Just by not saying it. So then, so that then kind of tells you how the bat character, which is much more than a bat character, obviously. It goes all the way back.
It's a huge part of modern culture, isn't it? In pop culture.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, it's like, it's still it's in your face all the time, still to this day. The Batman, the movies, the TV shows, whatever. It's huge. Sorry, I just have to bring that up.
Oh yeah. So we kind of already talked about the different ways it ties in with, and we already talked about Saturn in a previous show, so I won't go through all that. But what I will do is now go to like the modern day. What's happening in the modern day script? Because I know there's some who are interested in the Trump character, let's say.
He's fairly in your face at the moment.
Yeah. So then the Trump character just put in or hired a so-called senior advisor to the White House, and the office is called the Faith Office. So that's the idea of religion, right? Yep. So if you look at the person who they were brought in, her name is Paula Michelle White Kane. So her name is Paula Michelle White. She was married, and now her new last name, or it's hyphenated, is Kane.
Interesting.
C-A-I-N. So then that character, that Kane. Now, where this Paula Michelle White Kane character comes in is she's been married 3 times. So she's on her 3rd marriage. She's been previously divorced twice, and she's a prosperity gospel type person who is from, of all places, Tupelo, Mississippi.
Well,
all right. And we talked about Tupelo just in the last few weeks. What I find interesting about this is she's married to a Jonathan Kane, who is of Journey fame.
The band Journey.
Yeah, the band Journey. He smashes the keyboards, and so he has an article on the CBN 700 Club. Anybody needs to take a drink? Take it. 700 Club. He has an article talking about his journey to Christ, and that's one where you have to then read for the details, because these guys are lying to you. All right. Yeah. So then, because while he talks about that, he went to, and here, just so you know, a lot of so-called Jews get sent to Catholic schools for 2 reasons. One, they get fed a line at home against Jesus Christ. Literally, he's the boogeyman. And then when they go to the Catholic school, they get fed this line of this Holy Mother and all kinds of other witchcraft. So they're getting hit from both sides. So when they when they leave both, that's kind of that's not what the so-called Jew family wants. They want you to go get the education in the Catholic school because it's actually the behavior is better, but then not to go to the idea of conversion. But the ones who do convert then find out, because they have been exposed to some truth, that they are going to then falter or become a lay or whatever it is when you stop becoming a Catholic. What happens is then they become what's called agnostic, or they become disjointed because they got bull rushed or whipsawed on both sides. Now to get to this character, when the way that you look at these different characters is what they say. So when he gave this interview to 700 Club, he was talking about, this is almost the idea of the Samaritan at the well type idea. So he says, he's talking about their marriage, and he says, quote, "First of all, I said I would never get married. I would never go to Africa. I've been to Africa 3 times. Cain says with a laugh. Well, he's also been married 3 times. So then that's your 3-6. He's been to Africa 6 times. I'm sorry. So then that's your 3-6, 666 idea within the statement. So what he's doing is he's lying to you, and if you know the actual code, you can see this, because in the next few lines down, when he talks about, and keep in mind that the idea of the 777 code, or the false sense. I was like, okay, I get it. So I started writing, and I looked up, and there were 14 songs that God had given me. God had given him 14 songs. The idea of the 14, or the 777, or the idea of the 5, the senses. So God did give him 14 songs, but the God he's talking about is Yahweh, or Satan.
Right.
All right? The God of this world.
Bit of deception going on there.
Yeah, the god of the air. He's also, the name is Cain. So then now you have the idea, just to reinforce the 777, because Trump is the idea of the 777 idea. If anyone's interested, just Google or YouTube 777 and Trump and the connections. It's been talked about many ways. If you want to look at that, but then also, so then this idea of this office of faith, which has just happened, and you have this Cain character, the Cain is being brought in, and then the Cain character specifically deals with what's called prosperity gospel, meaning that you can have your cake and eat it too. That type of character, the ones who are fine with just sitting on, being the Scrooge McDucks, just sitting on money, having their best life now. And if they give a few pittance or tithings here and there, that they're fine. They quite literally miss the meaning. So yes. they're what the world would call Christians. So when somebody says, "Oh, they're Christian," these are the people they're talking about. These are the type of people they're talking about. Because you have the idea now, just so that there's no confusion. You have the idea of the god of the air. You have Satan, the idea of the lie. Any lie is a lie. It is a lie. So those that worship a lie, or false witness death, for example, they're followers of Satan. That's where their heart is. That's what they share. Therefore, so you have the idea of those who are Jews, the idea of the Revelation 2:9 and the Revelation 3:9 types, those who say they are Jews but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So you have those characters. You have the so-called Catholics. You have all of the different subgroups of Catholics, Jesuits and all the rest. You have the evangelicals. You have the what are they? The ones who are called the Zionists. All of those groups are the synagogue of Satan. Every one of them. They're all part of the same fallen system. So while they offer you this kaleidoscope, or this church religious vaudeville, they offer you the religious vaudeville. that you just choose the show you want to go into, but they're all being fed from the same place. You still gave the money to the same gatekeeper at the front of the office, right?
Yeah.
So no matter what you chose. Now, to get into some the idea of odd, or the idea of like the odd idea, meaning that to be different from as well. So then to escape the oddville is to be odd to the system, to mean to be different from the system, right? Not you give the system what's required, but you don't become part of the system. That's all. It's the idea of the coin and the fish. It's the idea if that's what they want from you, take it. That's it. Oh, you want that? Okay, fine, whatever. That's because you're not here. Nobody's going down to town hall to fight. Nobody's going to picket anything into change. None of that's going to happen. You're not going to fight City Hall or any of that crazy stuff. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen, right? This place moves on a sled or on a sliding scale, and it's on its way to the end. It's on its way to a stated purpose. And you can look at all the different stated purposes. Locally close, you have like it's say Los Angeles 2028. Where the different fires from the past few weeks, that's now going to be used to build that plan out. Then you have the UN 2030 and 2040 and 2050. You already have the 10 and 20 and 30-year plans placed in front of you. So you can decide right now to say, oh, okay, that's not going to happen, and then in 30 years you say, well, it did happen. That's because you chose to be ignorant. That's all.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because it literally is in your. If you want to find out, just look into United Nations agendas, and they've spelled it all out. It's spelled out. Really.
And you also see, and you also see, Rick, the idea of the consolidating, the idea of bringing together. When you, especially within the United States, as they talk about within the U.S. or the United States, as if they're getting rid of part of the so-called government, it has nothing to do with control. It doesn't make you any freer. What it does is it just takes more people out of that employment group and puts them into the free employment group, meaning they just become now looking for a job with the rest of the non-government employees. And then that just then creates a different dynamic. At no point, however, does getting rid of this government office or that government office give you any more freedom. That has nothing to do with, they're not even the same topic. They have nothing to do with each other. So what will happen, however, is like a golem, and I do want to cover the idea of a golem. Like a golem, they will take these characters, these different stories, this happening in the government, or this character getting rid of this and making this. They'll breathe life into that golem with their own breath, their own hopes and dreams, and they'll animate that character in their own imagination. So it becomes their purpose.
Yeah.
Now the idea, the idea of golem, or the idea of what a golem is in the so-called Jewish mysticism.
It made from clay.
Yeah. Well, it's the story of Genesis 2:4 and past, because if you read Genesis 1, read through Genesis all the way through Genesis 1, and you read Genesis chapter 2 verses 1 through 3, that's the 7 days. That's where man's already been created and told to go out and live and prosper and to tame the earth and to eat at will and do whatever. All that's been already done. And then all of a sudden, when you read Genesis 2 verse 4, there's this Lord God character showing up. He shimmies on into the scene, and that's Yahweh. Now Yahweh says that he's going to go ahead and create it. That's a second generation story. So so most people miss those two. For some reason they either conflate them, they don't read the first part, or the second part tricks them into thinking that they're somehow related to Adam and Eve, and they're not. Adam and Eve is the idea of a mental state that has been brought onto mankind and then brought into illusion. the idea of the serpent and the idea of the so-called Lord God and Adam and Eve being lost in Eden, and the God having to say, Adam, where are you? Well, what do you mean? Why are you looking for me? You should see all. The fact that you can't see all
Right.
tells me that you're not who you say you are.
That's very interesting. That's a very
Yeah.
pertinent thing, Dave.
So that's the first good cop, bad cop, bipolar story that you run into, really. So if you want the idea of split, remember there's a movie out that's Split, the idea of a split personality. So the so-called serpent, because if you go to Revelation and a few other places, it tells you that the serpent of old is Satan, is the devil. It says that is the same character. So you see that the same character is giving to man echoing or gaslighting. So it's the same character pretending to be two different things.
Yeah.
It's like, don't throw me in the briar patch idea, to the serpent. So then the God who's then cursing mankind and the serpent is in fact the serpent himself. It has nothing to do with who created you. So then people get confused and they think that they're part of this Adam and Eve thing. And that's where the chosen people comes in. That's where the whole hoax of the chosen bloodline, all of that stems from that first lie, that very first lie, that so-called the tree of good and evil. That whole Eden idea is the genesis of the lie that you somehow are this imprisoned character who is related to Adam and Eve, who then the woman was born from the man's rib idea. When if you read Genesis 1, it says that man and woman were made separately and equal. Man and woman was made for purpose. It's two different stories completely. So one's vaudeville and one's the truth. One's an odd town and one's the truth. So you have to. But most try to live, Rick. They try to live in both. They try to live in both.
Will that be why there's so much confusion on this in this realm these days with and so much arguments and people that are reading something and then seeing they're reading one thing in Old Testament and then being told something else in the New Testament, and they're using this to fight and to become atheists, to say this is all hypocrisy. You're saying it is hypocrisy.
It is. They're all. Go ahead. It's the 7-7 idea, Rick. It's the 7-7. It's the idea of mind versus mind. It's the idea of so then you have the 7-7-7 idea, right? So that's the whole idea of 7, and that's why you're going to see. And that's why if people just do a study, they don't have to take my word for anything. Just type in 7 and look how it's being used and see what it's about, and then you'll see that. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you know the simple code, then all these stories get broken down simply for you. You can see what the meaning of all these different acts were. Like the idea of a generation learning that somehow Three Stooges were funny, when most of what they did was not real funny.
No, very childish at best.
And then there's just the idea of the next generation, the idea of the Rodney Dangerfield of just doing this idea of stereotype, which just leads to like the bad idea. It's like, hey, my wife asked me to take her someplace she's never been. I took her to the kitchen. It's like, come on now. It's and you listen to that the first time you're like ha ha ha. The second time you ha ha. Third time you're like ah.
Yeah, right.
And the fourth time you're like, just move on, be done with it. And then so you listen to some of these guys now, and what's that other Jew? He's a real piece of work. I'm trying to remember. He used to have all the roasts all the time.
Don Rickles.
Don Rickles, what an a-hole that dude is. Yeah, I tell you what, if
a career based on running you down.
Oh yeah, if you take the time to like turn off the laugh track and just listen to the dude, he's quite evil. He's quite evil and dismissive. And unfortunately, a lot of people, even Mr. T, had to sit there and eat it.
Yeah.
They had to sit there and eat it because they knew if they said boo, that they're
Even Frank Sinatra would
yeah.
sit there and take it, and that's saying
uh,
something because you know
yeah.
he was part of that whole Italian mafia type
Yeah.
whatever. And you watch
Well,
him,
the Jew
he
mafia.
sit there,
Just so you
same
know, the
thing.
Jew. Yeah. Well, all the so-called Italian mafia. Just take a look at their pictures. They're all Jews, and they're all in. It's all fake bullshit too. It's all the. If you want real, you go to the street level, and if you want real, you go to the street level, and you go to the idea of the users, the pushers of drugs, hard drugs, prostitution, and other vice. That's where if you're going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt. The rest is
Yeah,
all business. The rest is all office. Because
yeah,
if they're going to get anyone to hurt anyone, it's going to be the users on the lowest level. And that's so. But then guess what? When most people see them, they turn their face. Because when they actually see the problem, when they see the addict, or they see the homeless guy, or they see that, they turn their face. Because
yeah.
they'd rather believe in this mob story, and that they romanticize this mob story.
Oh,
At
yeah.
least
Then this is so you're what this the show kind of is kind of the vaudeville thing and Hollywood. Hollywood has been the one behind this, right in front of your face, turning the Italian, pointing you to look at the Italian mafia as heroes. You know, from The Godfather to Goodfellas,
I,
etc., and glorifying the whole behavior as cool. Um, they're the bosses. These Italian, uh, whatever from that island in
right.
Italy that they all
Yeah,
come from,
Italy. Yeah, yeah.
apparently.
Yeah, if you look at Rick, I know you just mentioned recently, you had mentioned a quote about that history doesn't repeat but rhymes.
It
Didn't I hear
rhymes, yeah.
you mention
Mark
that?
Twain. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mark Twain. Yeah.
So then, if just on that example, you've heard me talk about before the idea of the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, for example,
Oh
being
yeah.
really the same story. So
Yep.
you have Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee, right? So you have the hobbits, and then they're really just the children, Harry, Hermione, and Ron Weasley, right? So then you have that kind of switch over. But then
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and where I really and then you have Gandalf, which is the king of Grandor, right? And
Yeah.
then you have Voldemort, you have Severus Snape, and Albus Dumbledore. Now Albus Dumbledore would be a direct relation with Gandalf. Those two are like really
Yeah,
straight
they're
back
both
and forth.
bearded, different
Yeah,
actors, but they're just the
yeah,
same. It's an archetype. Yeah,
yeah. It's an
100%. Yeah,
archetype.
yeah,
And then you have the idea of the snake or the serpent or the weasel, like you have Grim Wormtail or Wormtongue. I'm sorry, Wormtongue in who's ratting out the Sauron, who's working for Theoden, right? The
yeah,
king of Rohan. So
yeah,
he's like this double agent, and then you also have the Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail type character who betrays to Voldemort in the Harry Potter. So the
yeah.
Wormtail and those two characters are the same.
And
And,
note,
and
note
yeah,
also, as you've discussed before, but Stephen King,
oh yeah,
the corporation that are behind him,
uh,
it also features giant spiders. So the
yeah,
giant spider motif, which you'll see in Lord of the Rings.
oh
So
yeah,
it's the same story being told, and
yep,
and brainwashing children because that's who they're after. They're not after the adults for this stuff. They're coming after the children.
yeah. And I showed you
Um,
that picture of the Red Pyramid a couple pages from that book, and you told me about that. That's kind of a big thing amongst children is that Red Pyramid
It is.
series.
Well, that's yeah. So that author, I forget his name, but he was hugely popular, reiterating ancient Greek myths, which go back further, as we know,
Right,
but big archetypes all the time. What's his name? But he did, yeah,
Rick Riordan.
Rick Riordan, right? So his book. It's basically the Hercules myths. It's all these stuff, but it's tied in again with a character just exactly the same as a Harry Potter, orphan, same old, same old. Yeah, Rick Riordan's hugely popular.
And
I
he's
certainly saw it with, yeah.
Yeah, and he also in the series is called the Kane Chronicles with a K.
Okay, there you go. That
So
ties.
Kane.
We just mentioned that, and
Yeah,
by
yeah,
coincidence. Yeah, there
yeah.
you go.
So you have
That ties in.
the idea of the Kane Chronicles. So, and then I was also thinking that there's a similar author to you brought up what's his name um, uh, what was that author's name? He's like The Shining,
Uh,
Pet
Stephen
Cemetery.
King. Stephen
Yeah,
King.
Stephen King. So you have what's similar to him is not so creepy though is Dean Koontz. Now,
Yeah, I don't know about not so creepy, but certainly pertinent to this
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. What the thing is with the Dean Koontz character, he doesn't. King gets a lot sloppier, a lot more graphic in the manure part of the story than Koontz. Koontz is he's a creep in his own way, but you'll know every tree and bush on the street of every scene because he loves to talk about that foliage and things like that. But he has, speaking of odd, directly into the Oddville or vaudeville, is you have the Odd Thomas character, which is the idea of another character brought in, this kind of fry cook from Pico Mundo, who's a real nice guy, wouldn't hurt a fly, has this idea of can track things with his mind, and
Yeah.
you know and his girlfriend Stormy Llewellyn, which the idea of lie is right in the last name. It
We've heard
becomes
we've heard Stormy mentioned with the Donald Trump character as well. You'll notice this is another archetype, 100%.
Yeah, and then that character becomes almost like a ghost servant, meaning or a guideway in a way, a spiritual door. Then you have the idea of this Ozzy Boone character, the Oz character, who is kind of a non. It was like an atheist type character who's really just of the world. However, is well read in the world, being that it's also an author character, but is able to help the so-called Odd Thomas character through knowing the different world connections through story. So that's also a character who will pass these same similar ideas through a so-called likable character. And also even the Midnight Bay, Christopher Snow novels, where Fear Nothing and a few others, where he's dealing with government, so-called animal experiments, things like that.
Yep.
You know, so that's really kind of what those characters they cover, especially with the Odd and the Christopher Snow, that kind of covers. He's made to cover those type ideas, and also, whenever possible, bring up the idea of the 9/11. If it's at the right time when these books are written, they'll mention 9/11, or they'll mention some other hoax story
I think
to reinforce it.
Yeah, Dean R. Koontz also brings the 9/11 in one of his early books, apparently. I can't remember the actual one, but he was definitely feeding stuff in. And just remember, Dean R, and R's 18, that's 9.
Yeah.
Dean 9 Koontz is giving.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because check this out. In that movie I talked about earlier, the Bat Whisperers in 1930, when the character, the Blavatsky woman character, is presented the card of the lieutenant who's investigating, his name is M.R. Anderson, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson. And that's straight out of we know that one from the Matrix, which is definitely fooling. Another one. They all tie in, though. So all these, between Koontz, Reardon, Harry Potter, which is, I've no doubt that woman has nothing to do with the actual writing of that book. She was just the front woman for the whole thing, because it's now the biggest selling book ever for the teen and below.
Yeah, just as far as what she covers, though, Rick, just as far as what she covers, it's quite extensive. There's a lot in there as far as
Oh yeah.
demonology and everything else.
Well, I've heard a guy. So I don't delve too deep. I have read an awful lot about the stuff, but I don't. I keep it. I don't want to absorb too much of it. Like I'm not going to sit there and read
Mm-hmm.
Aleister Crowley books, but
Mm-hmm.
the I listened to a guy who was a admitted 33rd degree Mason.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that when he read those books, he said, "There's no way." He was the guy. He said, "There's no way that woman would know this stuff," because he said, "I barely know this, and I've been spending all this time in the realm
Right.
down there." And yeah, it's absolutely literally saturated with demonology and real demonology, not just
Right.
pretend stuff. It's heavy duty. What that woman supposedly has written. I'd say there's a group of people behind her, just like Stephen King.
Well,
In
here's
my
the
mind.
thing about power, Rick, is that if I can get you to believe something and act on something, I control you.
Yeah.
So I simply, if I am the news, or if you are one that turns on the news or turns on the radio in the morning, all I do on that end is I put out a story, X, Y, Z, and then it goes into your ear. And as soon as you walk up to somebody else and you say X, Y, Z, I own you.
That's right. You've
I
repeated the
own
lie.
you because you work for me.
Yeah.
You eat and sleep and do all that other stuff on your own time. But when you're out there talking to people and doing all this, you work for me because you're repeating stories that got fed to you. You didn't go out and
Yeah.
check them to make sure they were true. You simply just repeated them. And that's
Yeah. You
what
believed.
most people
You've
you run into
believed someone.
are.
You've
They're
believed someone.
employees of the
Yeah.
system. They are
That's
demons of
right.
the system. DAEMON, meaning that they just execute a rehearsed script out of their mouth
Yeah.
that they did nothing but hear, and they repeat it to you as being a truth. They at
And
that
this is
point are
computer.
a
This is
demon.
computer talk here. I'm just gonna. Dave knows the stuff about computer. This is the demons of computer. Uh,
Back after a brief delay, Rick.
it's funny how these things happen when you start talking about important stuff. And
Yeah.
the Harry Potter, et cetera, all the stuff it's very, very pertinent to the real what's going down in the world today.
Right.
So you do get technical problems when you say certain things. So we'll just keep going. We're talking about Harry Potter, or
I
whatever
was
you want to
thinking
talk.
about one more thing, Rick, about Harry Potter before I kind of leave it,
Go.
and that's I was just thinking just when I was mentioning the names that Severus Snape, who is the idea of the black and white character, who's the idea of the one you don't know if he's good or bad because he
Yeah.
plays both sides of the fence. The idea of seven's right in his name, Severus Snape. So Severus. So
Yeah,
you can see
yeah,
the you can see it
100%.
right in there. And so it's the idea of mind or Zion. It's where one's mind's at. So then I was wanted to mention to you. I'm not sure if you had heard it. The bit of trivia when it comes to Mr. Anderson is that my last name, my personal last name, until 2 generations ago, was Anderson. So I would have been Mr. Anderson
There you
had my
go.
great grandfather not changed my last
Well,
name.
it's an incredibly powerful note because it's from Sweden or the Nordic. It's a Nordic name, isn't it?
Correct.
Son of Anders, son of the Anders, and extremely. It was back in our day, Dave. You know, we're talking about the old days. Anderson and Jones were the two most biggest names in in America, Australia, England, or whatever. Hugely popular names. But
Yeah.
interesting, they would use that Thomas Anderson for the Matrix.
Right?
Um,
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson. Yeah, very much so. Very much
Yeah.
so. Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, quite interesting. Quite interesting. So I was, what was I going to tell you about the idea of, oh, and also the idea of odd, AUDE, going back to that, uh, within the idea of Latin, it's to dare or to risk or to act boldly. So that's also the idea of, in movies, and you have this idea of code, but to act boldly or to dare is to risk the line. It's like, do you cross the line? Do you show the ankle? Do you
Yeah.
do you show do you show the knee? Do you do this? That. So
that was the Hays Code. The Hays Code was kind of to do with that.
Yeah,
too,
the Hays Code. And then if you go back even to the Song of Roland. Now, what's interesting about the Song of Roland is that it's just a French. It's just a story, but it deals with the idea of Aude Lebel being a character who is beloved by this other character named Roland, who is this 8-foot tall, tough guy. Yep. Which is quite interesting, 8 foot tall, because if you go to the King OG, the OG, if you go to the King OG character in the biblical story, it's 9 foot tall. He's 9 foot tall. So you have these ideas of tall, quite tall people throughout so-called history. It's not as if it's something new. Now, the idea of row, though, if you think of row and then land, because we talked about land as being in vil, because vil is not only the idea of at the end LE or light or illumination, but it's the idea of like a town, a village, obviously vil, or even a city, like we talked about Dark City. But within row land, you have the idea of row, which is the idea of eggs. Depending on how you have and then you also, so it's ROE. So you have
and remember,
RO and ROE.
Remember they used this technique with this abortion thing, the Roe versus Wade.
Right.
Law, and so you got two very aquatic or wet things wading in water, and row, the rowing a boat or the rope.
Yeah. Very good, Rick. Man, that's awesome right there. And I was also thinking that the show Evil, EVIL, which is the idea of like a lapsed Muslim, a lapsed Catholic, and a priest in training all go out on merry adventure to face, demons and this, that, and the other thing, is that part of the storyline is that through in vitro fertilization, that the eggs, the female eggs were being tainted or changed to where the babies born from those would be, of course, little devil spawn. And have different powers of different jinn. One, like for example, the fire jinn, which would be fire starter. Also, you have, which very similar to Carrie. Carrie also would have possessed or presented in that jinn, that character jinn, who can set the place on fire and bring the house down.
Huge movie.
Huge movie. So those characters also then are quite literally, even Pet Sematary, things like that, are presenting the idea of what's different about what's called jinn and what's called demons. Demons are bad, period. They're evil. Zero. The idea of jinn is they get confused because there's some jinn who can present to you as long as you're doing what they want as being positive or being so-called quote-unquote nice. However, all jinn are evil because all jinn are spawn of Satan, even by the so-called Muslim text.
These are disembodied spirits.
Yes, and in fact, we talked about that through the book of Enoch, as far as the only thing that can touch man, because you don't live in the Old Testament, you don't live in the New, you live during the time called Revelation, and the only thing that can offer you bad advice in this place, this realm called hell, is the spirit of the giants or devils or bad thoughts, the idea of thoughts that come into your mind. And now, since the age of so-called electronics, that those ideas are cast, C-A-S-T, are cast to you magically through the Hollywood. And that and Hollywood is in quotes means that Bollywood, all movie productions or videos, TV, play, all that, which are born from a man or a woman of the mind of the fallen or Satan or the lie. Meaning if their mind is fallen, if there is no truth within them, all they can do is create reflection of themselves, which is going to be in error. So you can tell it's going to, and all of these stories tie back within, the idea of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. If you've gone 6, you've gone too far. Just realize that you've already should have, you've already seen the connection. So just work it down to and keep it easy. You know,
And that's what would that be why the giant archetype ritual of 9/11 of the towers falling was psychically driven by TV and movies and media and radio, books and etc. to show the fallen as you in your subconscious you see the towers have fallen, and therefore you're going into this fallen state that
that too, Rick. But if you go back to Judges 16:29, which is the idea of 16, which is your 7, 29, which is your 9/11. That's the idea. That's when Samson reached out to the two central pillars
and pulled them down,
held the temple up, and brought the house down. So you see that 7/9/11 in Judges. So it's 7/16/29. But if you know the code and you reduce it, it's going to be 7/11. Reduce the 11 to 2 7s. The idea of 7/7. It's always the idea of the pillars fighting each other or coming into contact with each other. See, a lie cannot.
You've just brought up a vaudevillian or Hollywood or a theatrical term. He brought the house down.
Yeah.
If something's fantastic, he brought the house down.
Absolutely.
So that's again psychic driving. Same imagery in your head. The towers falling, the pillars collapsing, the house collapse. Yeah. I see this.
Yeah, and then guess what? The idea of Samson, it's more the idea. If you can look at these stories and not be like, don't jump into the character and become part of it, but think of what is the idea that's being spoken about. The character then brings the house down on a mindset or a way of thought. The so-called priests that were in. So then that mindset is what's being taken out of the picture. So everything has a reason that is not this physical idea that you have to worry about a body. It's a story is not a body. A story has a meaning or it doesn't have a meaning.
Yeah.
Right. So then just take the meaning first. Don't worry about the rest. Nobody's going to do anything about it anyway. Just take the meaning of the story. Just take the meaning of the story and then see what it's telling you. And then go out and test it against what you run into in the so-called world, which I call hell, which is this place that you find yourself in right now.
Yeah, we're in it. And we're in...
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
So this is where you're at. And once you know that, Rick, once you know something, it's much easier to it's like a job. It's like a job. Once you know the job, time slows down, things become easy. What you thought of was stressful before is no longer stressful. It's just because you have a process and a means to deal with it.
Yeah.
But if you keep pretending you don't know, and if every day you go to so-called work and act like you didn't learn anything or know anything from the day before, how hard is that going to be, being the new guy every single day of your life?
Exactly. Hey, well, on mentioning that, I'll bring this up kind of out of... I've watched how many episodes? Last 2 weeks ago, since the last show we did, I watched Severance, which is coming out on Apple TV. Now that is a big show, because you know it's a big show when you see Christopher Walken, John Turturro, Ben Stiller, Keanu Reeves. They're all involved with the show. And
is there any number you think about when you first say Severance?
7. Well, let me just tell you now, I haven't watched TV for a long time, but because I stopped drinking and smoking, a couple of weeks ago. Well, I've gone back into it again, but I just out of, I have a bit of a rest. And my youngest son said, "Dad, you got to watch the show." And I said, "Oh, okay." I sat there and I watched 1 episode, 2 episodes. I watched 3 of the first night. That's 3 hours. Yep. This show you've got to watch. It is a must-see because there is so much stuff in it, and you're going to be going yourself ticking. You'll be going bang, 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 bang. But I want to hear you watch. Now there's going to be 5 series of it, so they're up to. They've done 1 they had 3 years break. I don't know how anyone could have had the moral fortitude to be able to stand waiting for because it's so gripping that you want to watch more and more of it. But I watch stuff now with an open mind, and I just keep thinking, what would Dave say about this, and what would he think about this stuff? Because it's all color coded, it's tone, it's everything. But I think it's actually not bad. I actually really enjoy it. So first time in 10 years I've never ever binge watched anything, but I've binge watched this. And it's coming every Friday. There's a new episode, so I would love to hear your views of it because you're going to really see stuff. It's
Sure,
got
I'll take a look at it for sure.
yeah, and you're right about this Severin,
Yeah.
100%.
Now we also talked earlier about Severus Snape. It's you just once you see it, you just see it, and then
you can't unsee it.
Nope, you can't unless you choose to be ignorant. I mean, people do choose to? Do you know that there is the cult of the I don't know?
I know we've talked about that, and
the cult of the I don't know.
It's too easy to do. It's like, when someone says, "Well, what do you think about that?" Well, I don't know. And once you don't know it, that means you've just said that you don't know anything.
Yeah,
as we've just.
Yeah, and it's like you. But here's the thing: is if someone truly doesn't know. If they truly did know, they would be silent in the face of being informed.
Yeah.
But yet they think they know something. Therefore, anything that comes along that goes against whatever that is, whatever that demon is, that demon, remember, it just self-executes. It will self-execute and say, no, that's not what I was. So you do think you know something.
Yeah.
So what is it that you think you know? And then by the time they get done telling you, they're telling you some story that, of course, is something that was schooled into them, just like a fish, schooled into them in whatever level of school they went to. And then you can track it down to at what point in their life they were infected with that or possessed by that idea. Because all ideas believed on or acted on are possessions.
And interesting, the phonetics and sound of possessed and Pazuzu both have very similar
correct, yeah.
phonetics. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Very interesting stuff, Rick. So we are good to go for this week. That's
I think you've blown the stuff out of the water as usual, and I've added a few bits and pieces here. Had a few little technical issues, but I'm telling you, as a registered conspiracy theorist, Dave, every time I talk about something interesting online, I drop out. Things go. There's something going wrong with these. When you as you know, we're on a man-made computer system as we speak right now. You're in Arizona. I'm in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
They can obviously will do in the future. We're on man's, we'll say the demon run computer system. Yep. So that's what happens. You say something that's really relevant, and boom, you just disappear, or your sound drops out, or your clip, or whatever. So we're battling. Unfortunately we're on the realm of the earth that's run by Satan himself, and literally.
It's all here, man. And like I said, with the idea of the advent of AI and the idea of so-called AI and the voice, all you need to do then is just put in keywords or ideas or lines of thought, and in any show that crosses the server that's speaking about that or has those keywords will either get migrated to a holding cell, into the idea of moderation, meaning that it has to be, we're going to moderate or look at this, or it just gets completely deleted entirely. So that's the idea of really newspeak in disguise. Newspeak is the idea of using a language that is not used before so that you can hide what you mean. And so then the system will simply so if you want to talk about so-called COVID-19, or you want to talk about some UN program or some drill that's happened in the past, and the name, if you use that name, that can just be keyworded to just be deleted as soon as it's said.
Straight away. As soon as it's said.
So then all you have to do then, and that's why you have to come up with the idea of, if I can present to you a symbol that you know what I'm talking about. If I can present to you 3G7, you know what I'm talking about. You know.
Yeah, of course.
So you have, and then of course that you have to be fluid in that as well, because once those are found out, they'll just get added to. So you have to constantly change the way you put out to others.
You express yourself.
So you just change. Yeah, you're not going to fight the system. You're just going to work within it.
Exactly. And I totally get that too, because there's just ways and means of getting this conversation through. But sometimes, particularly if you're doing YouTube and some of the bigger ones, you do have to be careful what you say, because the algorithms, it's not run by. It's just definitely a very simple program that they're putting through it. That are they saying this particular out of their mouths? Are they making that particular vibration by the word, which is this is what the word word does mean, vibration.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, if you speak close enough to water, Rick, you're going to see the result.
That's it. Exactly. Exactly. And I do love watching the water. I love watching. I go, where are these? This just on a calm day, you can see the strange vibrations and movements of weird things. Water's an incredible thing.
I was out by the equator, Rick, on the DD 971. It was called the USS David R. Ray, and we were down by what's called the equator, and for several days it was as flat as glass. When I say glass, I mean glass. Literal glass. No clouds, none. So it was by several days into that experience, I'm walking because I was looking every day. I would walk outside and look, and the only lines you would see are from the fantail. You would see two lines going straight back, and then they'd arc out to the left and to the right, off into the distance, into nothing. But then ahead of us, could see. It was just flat as glass. But what happened was, with that strange vision, the kind of the view you have, it became like I was in a fishbowl. It became super small. What you would think would become large, it became super small. The whole space, it seemed like it was closing in on me. It was such a tight experience. It was quite claustrophobic.
How big a ship was that ship?
We had a little over 220 some people on at the time.
Wow, so fairly big.
Yeah, it's called a destroyer. I mean, it's a destroyer because it's in constant destruction mode. There's chips and rust and everything. It's in a constant state of disrepair. That's really why they're called destroyers. But it from a distance they look sharp as all get out because of the lines, like just the. But once you get close to it, you're like, what's all this bubbling under the paint? Well, don't chip it, otherwise you'll be looking through into the
that's what happened. Well, you put metal in salt water, and that's what's going to happen.
Well, I was chipping away one time on what's called a pass-through. I'm chipping away one time because I was going to repaint it haze gray. Man, I went straight through. I'm looking down at the guy. I'm like, oh, sorry, bud. So I had to put monkey shit. They call it monkey shit, but it's almost like Play-Doh. And you flatten it, make it flat, and then you just press it, and then you paint over that. That's the patch, man.
And that's keeping you floating. One of the weird things I've noticed years ago, I thought, having children, I was buying Play-Doh for the children, and what you just mentioned, but Play-Doh and Play-Doh sound awfully similar. And I think there's a beer there with Play-Doh, the amount of stuff.
Well, do you know Play-Doh is a transference medium? Have you ever pressed Play-Doh onto a comic?
Oh yeah, I have. Yeah, it actually does. Yeah, you're right, 100%. It takes the image of the comic onto the Play-Doh itself.
So the idea of the old reverso.
There's a big beer there.
The old reverso. Yeah. So it's the idea of being able to grab the pigment or the dye from the paper itself.
Mm.
So then
Dye
while it's
and
dry,
dye.
yeah.
Dye
So while
and
it's dry
dye.
to your finger, back in the old days, you could still rub it though, right? Remember that? You could still rub it and kind of.
I grew up playing with Play-Doh.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. All right,
Yeah.
Rick. I don't want to keep you too long, so we'll go ahead and
All right,
head
dude,
out. And we'll
fantastic.
call it the 24th show being
24
done.
show. Hey, man, another fantastic conversation. I have to say that. Always look forward to these ones, Dave. So you send the bot. You send the bot out, and
yeah, I'm gonna send it out. All right, bye everybody.
Bye. See you next week.
If you leave any comments, I'll answer them. No worries.
And it's fantastic. So many people listening. So many.
Oh yeah,
listening.
for sure.